Federation, National Space Council, and FAA COMSTAC. Please welcome Eric.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And Scott, this has been a great program so far. I've been able to kind of come in and out a little bit, and I think like any great program like this, it's always nice to see so many, I won't say old friends, I'll say familiar faces, but more importantly, a lot of new faces and a lot of new innovative companies and ideas. So that's been really great to see, and I think that's really a hallmark of our industry, of the continuous influx of new talent, new ideas that we're seeing. I don't know, I won't be talking about as much new talent. I'll be talking about some old ideas that keep getting kicked around, but also in a new era of space, what this may mean. I was going to kick it off with a few topics that I think are going to be of interest in the coming year for kind of commercial space industry, but space industry in general. And then, Scott, I'll kind of open up to you for any questions that you may have, or from the audience. I often gauge whenever I give talks how much my wife would be tolerant of listening to me. So 20 minutes is just about enough, I think, at times. So the question I was asked, what are some of the regulatory frameworks and policies that have been set in motion going back over the past decade, the decade prior, and how it's going to get us to this point of privatization or greater privatization that we're seeing. And I speak a little personally on this, the last 6 years, the incredible growth in the space industry has been nothing short of remarkable. The amount of companies that have come online, the technology developments that we have seen, the funding, the capital funding that has flown into the industry is just remarkable. And this has helped increase, the case and the argument that many of us here in Washington are making on these ideas of public-private partnerships and greater utilization of commercial innovation across all aspects. And certainly this year it was really highlighted with the success of the capstone mission this year, 2020, of the Commercial Crew vehicle with SpaceX. I know Will was with me early on this process, and many others pushing for commercial cargo and commercial crew, and there was a lot of legislative fights and budgetary fights, but I think through the success of commercial cargo and commercial crew, it's really shown a path forward on how this can be done, how it can save the taxpayer really orders of magnitude of money off the traditional firm fixed price cost contracting, and so it's been a great breakthrough to see. One of the successes that I think we have seen over the past year, and this was discussed a little bit on the last panel, was the success that the National Space Council has had, and the way that this administration has used it, and the leadership of Scott Pace on the Space Council, and the work that Scott and his team has done at pushing forward a lot of agenda items that we felt were quite critical, but also it was that he listened to industry in a way that really, and this is not a partisan statement at all, but it's been a real long time since space was at the forefront of any administration, and I think through Scott's leadership there and the buy-in of the vice president, space got really put on the forefront. And we see this with the Artemis program. I'll kind of jot down a little bit on the different space policy directives, and I'm sure I'm going to be a little out of order, but certainly the ones that I think had an impact and that we should be looking at in the years to come. But Artemis being a major one, which has really generated a lot of buzz, a lot of interest, and has really engaged the commercial industry in a remarkable way, bringing so many different partners and ideas and given us a vision as well in returning to space. So I think Artemis is a great program. I think the timeline, and I'll meld this in with the aspirational and also maybe the reality of how these programs are going to go. And the vision for Artemis was always, to land the first woman and the next man on the moon by 2024. I think that is aspirational, but I think it's not that far off. I think with consistent funding by Congress, I think we could see this happen by perhaps 2025, 2026. And again, I think that they need to continue to leverage the innovation and intuition of the commercial sector. Another area that I think was a great move forward was the streamlining of regulations, and in particular how it dealt with the space industry was over at the FAA, the launch and reentry regulations. I think the SLR was a more formal name, Streamlined Launch and Reentry Regulatory Regime. And this was a 2.5 year process that usually takes about 5 to 6 years to streamline this immense of a regulation. And kudos to Wayne Monteith and his team over at FAA AST on one, engaging industry, two, really listening to what the concerns were from a launch and reentry perspective, and then rolling up their sleeves and taking all that input and putting into this new rule. Is the new rule perfect? No. There's some areas of that need a little remedial work, and I think they're still taking the input from industry, and I think that will be covered in a lot of the circulars that will be coming out, the ARCs, the circulars, that the addendums to the rule. But it was a great step forward, and I think we're going to see more of this. And we're discussing this right now on COMSTAC, the Commercial Space Transportation Advisory Council, discussing other areas of improvement on regulatory improvement that we can make as an industry advisory board. So to have that buy-in with your regulator, to have that relationship and the open lines of communication, I think is really critical as we move forward. With the amount of cadence that we're going to see in the launch industry. I saw another area we should focus on, and one of the panelists spoke about this a little earlier, was the integration of our airspace, the airspace integration. And this was a 2.5 year fight that I had, and a lot of the commercial commercial launch companies had with the aviation community, and what it broke down to was really a lack of communication, a lack of understanding on how much the airspace the launch companies are using, and how much airspace we require compared to that of what the aviation community is using the national airspace for. And we really had to roll up our sleeves and get dirty on this a little bit. But at the end of the day, we were saying, gosh, you guys are launching 40,000 times a day, launching and reentering. We're launching about 40 times a year, hopefully 50, in the coming year. But, who's really the problem here? So that 2 minutes of intersection that we have, I think that there's a way we can work through this. And I think after a long discussion and working with a lot of the stakeholders in the aviation community, not just the airlines, but I say the aviation community at large, the pilots and other areas, I think we've had a lot of very good dialogue, and I think educating the congressional staff on what who are the different players in the national airspace issues. I think that was really important. Another area that we focused on a lot, and I think this was Space Policy Directive 3, was space traffic management, and the idea that the Department of Defense want to take some of this off their plate, that they can't be constantly tracking all being the traffic cop for everyone, all the commercial entities and for all the different nations. And so who should be that that steward, that space traffic management steward. And the role, I think, after a study from the NAPA Commission, the National Association of Public Administrators, or Academy of Public Administrators, came down to the idea that this role, it should be a whole of government approach, but led by the Department of Commerce. And with that, Commerce started moving forward on taking on the space traffic management role and really integrating industry, and how private industry and how the commercial sector can help on this. And I think we've seen some great breakthroughs. Now the challenge is there's going to be a new Commerce Secretary in a few weeks, and what their level of interest on space will be. I think that we're going to all have our work cut out for us on not just Commerce, but all these different new heads of agencies on educating them on how important space is. I'm very parochial on this. I think space is the most important thing, so I will tell everyone that. So certainly I realize there's a lot of problems that need to be fixed in our country, but I try to stay in my lane on space. So we'll continue to advocate to upgrade that office that Kevin O'Connell is running right now, the Office of Space Commercialization, because I really think it's a vital organization that kind of stands in the middle between industry and government, and it really understands. I think Kevin's done a great job of understanding what industry and the commercial sector can provide to the government and how this can be helpful. So that's one thing. The other thing was the creation of the Space Force, and what the Space Force is now a year old, and clearly like many one-year-olds still in their infancy, and what they'll be looking at and the policies they'll be looking at. And from people that I have spoken to, some of the things that I think will fall, in the Space Force's purview and some of the policy areas, is a greater development of cislunar space and what they should be doing within that space, from here to the moon and everything in between. The SSA that goes on within that space, pardon the pun. I think we're going to see, and what that means. How do we get there? How do we operate there? Is that a call for, more nuclear, propulsion? As we see, again, another benefit of the Space Council was that it brought in new players and non-historic space players like the Department of Energy and others that have a much greater vested interest in space, and they've been actually a real pleasant partner to work with on some of these areas. So the synergies that you see among the different agencies, DoD and Energy, for instance, on propulsion, I think is going to be a big area of that we can work in. Also, other areas of offensive and defensive counterspace, which is always a challenging topic, but certainly one that I think is critical within the doctrine of the Space Force. Certainly protection of space commerce. I like to think is one of the most important, but that does fall into the counterspace, defensive and offensive counterspace world. Promoting secure communications, continuing to enhance this through quantum encryption and other areas. I think that's going to be an area of opportunity to work with Space Force on, and DoD space in general. An area that has always been the holy grail, I think, for the DoD, that we're not there yet, but I think we are getting closer, and with all the launch companies online, it's becoming more attainable. But the idea of responsive space, not that you'll have a vehicle ready, in a month from now or 2 months from now, but when they actually need it, in a 911 scenario, how capable will we be there? And I think that's going to get a greater look. Smart AI, machine learning, I think that those are going to be other areas of interest for DoD, for Space Command. But I think the biggest area that Space Command is going to be looking at, or Space Force rather, is going to be looking at, is leveraging the investment that the DoD has made in the commercial space area. And what is their intent to get out of this, and how do they view their role too often the DoD is seen, much like NASA, on the ISS, with this anchor tenant capability or role, I should say. And how does DoD get away from being that anchor tenant of these commercial capabilities? But I'd also flip that around as how can the DoD foster a lot of these commercial capabilities that often they don't know about? And how do commercial companies get into the DoD to showcase what they're doing? And I certainly applaud the work that AFWorks is doing, as well as DIU. I think they've been fantastic on reaching out to the commercial community and understanding what is out there and how they can help promote that. So I would like to see those two programs on steroids in the coming years, because I really think from a commercial perspective, they're some of the strongest allies we have. I guess the Space Development Agency could also fall in that category. The other interesting thing, and as I know my time is waning and I want to open it up, Scott, if any questions, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Senate now works and how Congress will work and who will become champions within Congress on space issues. Space has historically been a very bipartisan issue. Really divergent personalities have worked well together on these issues. And I think we should hopefully continue to harness that bipartisan spirit. I think Senator Sinema will be taking over the Senate Commerce Committee. I think Senator Cruz, Subcommittee for Space, Senator Cruz will be the ranking member. I know they've had a very cordial relationship in the past. With a 50-50 split in the Senate, things are, you're going to have to work together and come closer on ideas and compromise. So I hope that's not a problem, and I hope that's more of an opportunity for the space community to advance.
Thank you so much, Eric.